I've gotten to the point where if I'm not wearing like bright blue eyeshadow or something, I'm like, oh, this is such a casual makeup day. Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here to do the Bagel Book Tag. This tag was created by Josh over at Literary Gladiators, and I was tagged by the fabulous Rashmika from Rashmika Likes Books. I will of course link both of them down below. Number 1. Plain. A writer you feel does a great job with the same kind of work. And I'm actually going to go with one I talked about in a recent kind of featured author video, and that is Georgette Heyer. I've read I think 5 or 6 of her books at this point, and she does Regency romance just really, really well. Even if the tropes don't really go my way, and even if I don't like the characters or kind of how the story ends up, I always enjoy the experience of reading her books because her writing and her style is just something that's very cozy and enjoyable to me. And I'm actually holding her book Footsteps in the Dark, which is the first, I think it's in the first in one of her murder mystery series, and I don't actually think I've read any of those. So she pretty much had 2 kinds of stories she wrote. One was like the straightforward Regency romance, and one was I think like murder mysteries and things, but I think those do still have like a romantic element. And I think something that's true across all of her books is the really strong sense of place and the really clever and witty writing, and that's what I love about her books. Number 2, Everything. A writer in which you own every work. And I went with Frances Hardinge, who wrote The Lie Tree and many other wonderful books. I don't think this is a surprise because she is one of my favorite authors of all time. I actually have a whole like featured video on her. It's kind of old, but everything I say is still true. I stand by it, and I know I'm gonna buy her works basically forever because I really, really love her stories and her characters and her style, and just her books really speak to me in a way that sometimes is hard to explain, and I love them. Number 3, Sesame. Your favorite Sesame Street or Muppets book. So this one I actually don't have an answer for because I didn't really watch or like Sesame Street or Muppets growing up. Like, I didn't strongly dislike them or anything, but it just like wasn't a part of my and my brother and sister's childhood, so no answer. Number 4, Poppy. A short work that gives you an ecstatic high. See what you did with the Poppy question, Josh. And I chose Poems from the Book of Hours by Rainer Maria Rilke, translated by Babette Deutsch. Now this is incredibly short. It's a selection of Rilke's poetry, and I absolutely loved this collection. I think at this point I've read it at least 3 times, maybe more than that, because they're the kind of thing where you have to read them more than once to really take in everything that he's saying, or try to take in everything that he's saying. And this collection is so, like, his poetry is so, like, luminous almost? That's not a helpful word to use about written work, but like that's the word that it makes me think of. And when I would finish reading his poems, especially if I read like a few in a row, I would genuinely feel this like strange, like otherworldly, like kind of ecstatic. Like it really was an amazing experience, and I just really, really connect with the particular style of his poetry, and I think this selection was obviously done very well because pretty much every poem really spoke to me, and I definitely want to check out more of his poetry in the future. Number 5, Salt. A good book you had to put down in order to catch yourself. And I'm gonna go with The Kingdom of Little Wounds by Suzanne Kokel. I actually mentioned this in a video I'm really proud of, actually, that I did a while ago, and that was 3-star books I'm glad I read. This one, it's not one of my favorite books because again, I did give it 3 stars, but I'm so glad I finished it because it really is the kind of thing where you have to see where the author is ultimately going in order to appreciate everything that happened before. There's lots of trigger warnings. It's extremely graphic in terms of sexual assault because it is kind of a historical, semi-fantasy, but mainly historical book, and it's very realistic in the way that women and people of color were treated. It's the kind of book where I definitely wouldn't recommend it to everyone, and it's even the kind of book where I'm not sure I would read it again if I knew everything about it that I do now, but it is something I'm really glad I finished, and that does mean something. Number 6, Garlic. A genre you just cannot get enough. And very easy for me, that is fantasy. It's my favorite genre. I'm never gonna get tired of it because there is so much you can do with it, or there are so many subcategories of it that I absolutely love, and I just think it's a really great tool for exploring like things in our world, you know, problems or issues or like current events or something like that. Like I think it's a really great tool for exploring those in a way that is often very entertaining and interesting. Just enjoy like the infinite possibility of fantasy. Number 7, Onion. A book that may cause you to get stares, but you enjoy anyway. So actually the first thing that came to my mind was when I'm in the YA section or like teen section of my local library. I do feel really weird because I generally seem to be like the oldest person there. I feel like in bookstores I'm still kind of in the acceptable age to read YA, even though I don't believe you can be too old to read YA or middle grade or anything like that. But I do feel like there's more leeway given with age ranges in many of the bookstores I've been to, whereas with the library, I feel like I stick out more. So I guess I'm just going with like YA or middle grade in general can be something that might make people stare or judge me, but I don't care because I think it's important to read a variety of experiences, and frankly, they are just good stories. Like I'm not gonna not read a good story just because it's in a different section. Number 8, Cinnamon Raisin, a sweet but thought-provoking work. And I chose From Twinkle with Love by Sanjay Menon. So we follow our main character Twinkle, and she wants to be a filmmaker, and she's kind of writing letters, like diary entry style, to all of these famous female filmmakers. And so there's a lot this book says about women in the film industry, and especially women of color in the film industry. But there's also the very sweet romance and friendships. And the other like thought-provoking thing I really enjoyed about this book was about like art in general and the responsibility to tell the truth in art and how that doesn't always look like what you think it does. I just thought that was really profound and wonderful, and I ended up really enjoying this book when I just thought that When Dimple Met Rishi I thought was okay, but I absolutely loved this one. Number 9, French Toast, a writer you were happy to have discovered this past year. So I assume they mean the current year that we're in, and I'm gonna go with one that I actually discovered very recently as I'm filming this, and that is Nnedi Okorafor. She wrote the Binti trilogy, and I think she also has a fantasy series that I haven't heard too much about, actually. I don't know what that's about, but I really loved this. This is a really short science fiction novella, and it's very hyped, it's very popular, and I read it for Feminist Lit February actually, and I just adored this so much. I'm really excited to continue the series. I really like the way that Nnedi Okorafor can connect you to characters and to a world in such a short space of time, and I also really like her writing style, so I'm really excited to continue exploring her other work. Number 10, Egg, a work of nonfiction that caused you to form or switch a position. So I actually chose one where it didn't really like form or switch a position for me because it was something I was already aware of, but it was the first exposure I had to like somebody's perspective who had actually lived through, and that is Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. This is his memoir or sort of autobiography about growing up in apartheid South Africa, where he was quite literally born a crime because it was illegal for white people and black people to have children together. And I just thought this was so powerful, so funny. He's definitely a very clever and entertaining writer, but without sacrificing any of the realism of his story, and I just think it's really important to read things like this. I'm sure if you're South African, reading this would probably not impress you as much, but for me, who didn't have any of that background, I think it was really important for me to read this and sort of build on the things that we learned in school about apartheid and about South Africa with an actual, like with a person's real life firsthand account. I think that was really important, and it gives like a human face to it, which I think is one of the most important things you can do when you're learning about periods in history. Number 11, Rainbow, an LGBTQIAP+ work that made you think. And I'm going with another Feminist Lit Feb pick this year, and that was Noteworthy by Riley Redgate. I loved this book so much. We follow our main character Jordan, and she decides to dress up as a boy and audition for an all-male choir, like a cappella group, after she didn't get into her musical as a girl. And it really explores gender and expectations and like friendship, and just, it's so good. There's a lot of important topics that it tackles, and I think it does all of them really well. And there's also a storyline about Jordan discovering that she is actually bisexual, and kind of her like realizing that and what it means for her. There's just so many things this book does really well. And another thing I want to point out that I really enjoyed about this book is that there was like an explicit comparison drawn between Jordan deciding to dress up as a boy and impersonate a boy in order to get into an a cappella group versus trans people, and how many trans people are forced to live their lives every day, like feeling like they're dressing up. And I think that was so important, and I don't think I've ever read a cross-dressing storyline in a book or in anything that really did that. What she is going through and what she's doing, even though there are a lot of unpleasant things about it, she realizes it's not even close to a trans person's experience, and I just thought that was handled really sensitively and really well. And I don't think I've ever seen that like explicitly like called out and like explored in a book before, in a book that had this kind of like girl dresses up as boy element, so I thought that was really well done. Number 12, Bialy, a fairy tale you feel people need to read in its original form. And I'm gonna go with Beauty and the Beast, and let me read the author here. The version I read, it was by Gabrielle Suzanne Barbet de Villeneuve, something like that, and I'm pretty sure that is the original version. And I think it's really important to read this because, especially if you enjoy retellings, I think this is the case where it's really important to know the original story, because there are some retellings I've read that have gotten pretty low reviews because of certain story elements, and I think that it makes them more enjoyable if you know the author is calling back to the original tale. Like, I think there's kind of this expectation that retellings are going to follow kind of the Disney Beauty and the Beast, which I love, by the way, and I have nothing against the Disney Beauty and the Beast adaptations, but I do think it adds something to the experience if you have kind of a wider view of the original story. Plus, there's the fact that the original fairy tale was written or kind of constructed as a way to convince young girls to go through with arranged marriages that their father put them up to. So that's also kind of a social commentary issue that I think is very important to know about. Number 13, what is your favorite kind of bagel, as well as your favorite bagel condiment? And my absolute favorite are the like special edition ones that only They only seem to stock around Thanksgiving, and those are the cranberry ones. I love cranberry bagels, and specifically I love them with like the garden vegetable spread, like cream cheese on top. It sounds like a really weird combination, but it's so good, and I'm really sad that there's like such a small period of every year where you can actually buy the cranberry bagels. And number 14 is bagel tray. Who do you tag? I'm going to tag Ashlee Stormo and anybody else who wants to do this tag. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!